We are back with another episode of the Black Box Podcast. I'm your host, John.
And I'm your host, Ahmed. And today we have a really awesome guest, Jack Allweil, who is an author, blogger, co host of his own podcast. And I guess the focus of today's episode, he's also a house hacker. Jack, uh, in his professional life, or I guess in his career, works as an actuary, which he has spent so much time becoming an actuary. As if anyone listening is also an actuary, they're probably nodding their head because they know about the amount of work that goes into it. But yeah, no, we'll talk about real estate, talk about his
Money
his
management.
ventures, his learnings, money management, and a lot more. We even get to talk a little bit about land, which I don't think we've covered much of on Black Box. So very interesting topic.
Yeah, no, it was fun. Thanks, Jack, and I appreciate all the advice because I asked him a few things about when I, make my break into real estate. So, yeah, tune in, and I think you guys will enjoy it and find something that you can learn. But
Yeah,
let's jump into it.
let's do it. Hey guys, just wanted to shout out Zencaster, our platform of choice for recording remotely with our guests. They're sponsoring this episode, so tune in later to hear more about some really great offers. Hey y'all, we're really excited to tell you about Blvck Ice, the black-owned jewelry business owned by Sean Moore, our previous guest on the Black Box podcast. If you think about it, Blvck Ice and like Black Box, it's almost like it's meant to be. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah, but we like to focus on investing in the show, so we kind of look at it as we're partnering up with a asset class. Jewelry is considered an investment, and with the stock market and crypto being pretty volatile right now, and for the most part going down, jewelry, especially precious metals, gold and silver, those tend to preserve their value really well. So you know that's also another reason why we think it's a good opportunity. But also, I've worked with Sean in the past. I got a gift from my mother actually for Mother's Day. It was a relatively custom piece, nothing crazy, but Sean was quick, he was easy, he was responsive, the price was fair, and we just met up and transaction was easy, and my mom loved the gift. So
yeah, if this all sounds good to you, check out Black Ice's website at Black Ice NYC. And at all socials, and there's a V instead of an A for the black. So as you guys are probably used to with little letter substitutions by us, but you could find stock goods there. And Sean also specializes in custom goods with quick turnaround times.
yeah, Sean does great custom pieces. I've seen a bunch of them on his social media. But yeah, he's also good for sourcing, like watches, specific Rolexes, anything like that you're looking for. He can also get you a better price than, if you're going to, a bigger name shop or someone that you don't really know that might try to gouge you on the price. So along with that, it's also supporting an upcoming entrepreneur. He's had a lot of success. He just celebrated his 1 year anniversary of the business, had a really nice party. And
Let's get back to the show. All right. Hey, Jack. Thanks so much for hopping on the Black Box podcast. I guess, could we just have you introduce yourself to get started?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks so much, Ahmed and John, for having me on. It's quite the pleasure. So, my name's Jack Allweil, 33 years old now. I grew up in a very small town in Michigan, about 100 miles north of Detroit. I moved down to Charlotte, North Carolina in 2015 for a new job. I've been studying to be an actuary ever since about 2010 is when I took my first exam. So moved down here in 2015, got a job. 2016 rolls around. I had been at the job about a year and a half. I had been under 3 different managers, so it was a little turbulent, and I lost my job. So at that time, I was fortunate enough to have very cheap rent, as I was basically renting a room from this nonprofit organization called Moisha House. So we basically got subsidized housing to throw events for the the Jewish community in Charlotte. So like 4 or 5 events a month. And in return, we would get subsidized rent. So I was paying about $450 a month at that time. And before, when I first moved to Charlotte, I lived a little bit closer to the downtown or uptown area. I was paying like $1,400. So I was studying so much for the actuarial exams, didn't really have much time to enjoy the amenities. And I'm like, okay, I should probably look for cheaper rent while I'm studying so much. So that's what I did. That's kind of how I ended up in Moisha. And I mean, I was fortunate to have the cheap rent because I was able to save up a lot of money. And when I was fired, I said, well, now I have all this time. And I used to complain that I never had time. I'm going to go take a trip. So I took what I called my roots trip, where I went to Europe and saw where my grandparents grew up in like Poland and Hungary. And I even went to Prague, and I actually met my now wife, who was living in Vienna, Austria, if you can believe that. So, and
That's
my
awesome.
life was really quite, I mean, changed in so many ways on this trip. And one of the ways it changed is I really started reading. Like, I was never a reader growing up, and I always felt like it was forced, and maybe that's why I didn't like it. But on this trip, it gave me some breathing room to kind of assess how my life was going. And what caused all the reading was I ended up going to the Auschwitz concentration camp about 40 minutes outside of Krakow in Poland. And my grandfather had grown up in Krakow. So it was very touching being in Auschwitz in December when it's snowing. And I'm thinking, like, how does anyone survive here? So I had a lot of questions. And that's kind of when I started reading a lot. And I read a lot on World War II. And I kind of just let my interests take me. And I started reading about soccer. And one thing that I
I
passed
see the Arsenal
up,
flag.
yeah, one thing that I passed upon was this idea of house hacking. And the idea of buying a house, renting out the other rooms in the house to minimize the amount you were spending on housing. And I had thought that I was fortunate to begin with, that I was living in Moisha and had the cheap rent, but I still felt a little bit restricted, actually, because I was still paying rent. Whereas if I owned the whole house, if I wanted to move somewhere, I could just rent out the whole house. So I was like, as soon as I get another job, I'm going to buy a house and rent out the other rooms. So I got a different actuary job, 2017, and was working in a few months. And that's when I started the house hack. I don't know if we want to stop there for.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, well, yeah, we have plenty of questions to ask on that. Um, I feel like I've said it in a similar way on the podcast before, but when I was in school and I used to get asked to do reading assignments, I never liked reading. I was always a Spark Notes kind of guy, like day
Mhm.
before the essay was due. But once once I started picking up reading over the past, I'd say 3 years or so, that's when everything started to kind of open wide for me, because it was just all this new information and knowledge that people were, willing to share, and I just wasn't obtaining it before. And I also feel like that's kind of the case for a lot of people that get into entrepreneurship. They end up becoming a reader to some extent. It may not be traditionally through books, but yeah. But I guess that was just a comment. But my question would be more: did you learn about the house hacking through the reading that you started to do,
It
or
was
was
it
it
was
something?
so my brother actually was doing his PhD at Vanderbilt, and he actually started house hacking during his PhD. Um, and when after I got fired, I went to Nashville briefly to kind of help him with that transition of moving into his new house. And that's when and my parents had done some rentals, so it was like kind of in my mind. But he had introduced me to the podcast Bigger Pockets, and that's really when I started getting more familiar with the vernacular, and I started reading a lot of those books, and yeah, it kind of just snowballed.
I guess. Sorry, I got one more. Uh, did it start? I guess this is more general about your approach now and your approach for the years since 2017. But uh, did it start with just one, and now you're trying to accumulate properties, or I guess, are you looking to cash flow on all your properties, or are you just trying to build equity? Like, how are you usually approach uh, going about that?
Sure. So I did. Yeah, I started out house hacking. I would recommend it for many people. You need less of a percentage down. And now, knowing what I know now, I guess I could have gone about it differently. But I feel house hacking is a great way to learn some of the business, learn how to screen tenants, just learn how to show someone through the property and kind of market the property in a way that makes it look attractive. And um, but that really gave me, it was like a landlording 101 class. And then I kind of got obsessed, and then I read more, I learned more. I learned about different financing, creative financing avenues. And in 2018, I ended up getting three more properties, 5 units, for basically nothing down. Like I found, and I heard this on a podcast. I just started cold calling property managers, asking if any of their clients were looking to offload properties for any reason. And this was back up in Michigan, actually, where I grew up. So I was, kind of familiar with the
Area.
area. They tend to cash flow a little better. The rent ratio seemed to be a little more attractive if you just want cash flow. But I mean, it's probably, but basically this couple was going through a divorce and they had to get rid of these properties. And I went to
Oh,
some traditional banks, couldn't get any financing. They said, you don't have a long enough track record. I went, and at that point, I probably would have stopped had I not read and listened to some of those podcasts. But I'm like, okay, well, let's go ask the sellers if they would like to sell or finance this. And sure enough, they said, yeah. And I got it for, I mean, it sounds crazy now, but I got all three of these properties for 60 grand. And now I think the estimates are like 240 total. I mean, I don't know if I could get that
holy
high,
shit!
but
Yeah,
it's like crazy to think about. And at the time, I think they originally were asking like 100, but like I was in North Carolina, like I had never been in the properties. I was
yeah.
like, okay, well, I'll give you 60. I mean, there was definitely some things that I learned along that. Like I didn't know that someone would have a rental property without insurance. So when I on the 1 3 unit, um, I after we had done the transaction, I said, "Well, yeah, who do you have insurance for? I'm having trouble getting insurance on this place." And she's like, "Yeah, we decided not to do it, and because
Is that legal?
the." I mean, so I ended up having to replace the garage roof
So
to
you can get
to
insurance?
to get insurance, and that was like a quick $4,500 right there. So there's definitely some growing pains with that process. But I just figured, well, I mean, what's the worst that happens? So, but and
It's a
then
great way.
yeah, and then I basically I was still studying for the actuarial exams. I and to basically to incentivize the sellers to do this, I offered them a much higher interest rate. I was paying them 6%, and I think my house was financed around 3.75 or 4 at the time. So I
Okay.
was paying them a good chunk higher. So I aggressively paid that off within, I think, 2 years. Um, and then basically it was easier for me to get traditional financing after that because I had these investment properties that were totally paid off. So that was pretty cool, and that helped me get the seven. We got a 7 unit last summer. That's been great, and that was basically purchased just comparing what I thought the market rent should be. So the rents were originally $3,100 per month gross for that 7 unit, and we've raised them in the last year to 4,100. So that's been pretty cool. And then just to diversify a little, we got a short term rental in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, right on the ocean, and
Probably does pretty good.
it doesn't really cash flow if you average it out. It's very seasonal, but the cool thing about that is we can use it a couple weeks in the off season, so that saves us in like the money we would be spending to go on
On
a
a vacation?
vacation somewhere. And that probably will appreciate at a higher clip than the Michigan properties. But yeah, so yeah, just trying to I guess trying to balance the cash flow versus the appreciation a little bit. And but I'd say my house hack was, I think, averaging I was probably having to pay about 500 or 600 a month, but at the same time, like I actually had refinanced it to a 15-year mortgage, so I was paying like $1,200 in principal each month. So that was pretty cool. Pretty cool setup.
Nice, nice. I guess because you brought up how you have properties in like different states, what are your thoughts or opinions on real estate investments in locations that you are not directly in? Do you think like you need some kind of like feet on the ground type of thing or anything like that?
Um, I mean, I guess it's a little bit of a nuanced answer. Like, I kind of like having so the first three I got were in three different cities, and one of them is actually close to my dad's office. So my dad will sometimes just drive by, take a quick picture for me. But in a lot of ways, I think it kind of hampers you being close because, like, when I was running this house hack. Now we have a pool at this house, and I was actually for a while I was having to do all the maintenance and stuff myself for the pool, and it was just like consuming my time. I would have been. I mean, I eventually learned to find a pool person that I could just outsource that work to. But I think having it long distance actually kind of pushes you along. Like you need to outsource this stuff if you really want to scale because like you
Yeah.
only have so many hours in the day where you can do it, and your time's probably spent better in other areas. So yeah, I mean, I for those first deals, I used the same property manager that had been managing them, so that was a pretty smooth transition, and they take 10% of the gross rents. And I have diversified a little bit. I have another property management controlling the or working on the 7 unit, even though it's in a similar area. So I kind of diversify across property managers and areas.
Gotcha.
Nice,
I
nice.
guess that kind of also comes down to like the point you said, if you're not outsourcing stuff, you can't scale. Like if you're working in the business, you can't really work on the business, like
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
actually making it bigger if you're always doing all those small tasks that you could get other people to do for you.
Yeah.
Um, no, and I liked how you were starting to touch on the numbers a bit. Could you kind of just go over, like, at least from your experience and what you've had in the properties you've obtained so far, like what's realistic expectations for people that, because there are some people on social media that were able to get a really good property and they're like, all right, I'm cash flowing like 1,000 a month on this 3 bedroom. Like, in a lot of cases, you're not really cash flowing a lot on your first house hack, especially,
Mhm.
but what's like realistic expectations for people listening as to when they are doing rental properties?
I mean, I try to use as conservative assumptions as possible when I'm like underwriting them. And I kind of just, I mean, I don't know even really where I heard this, but I kind of shoot for at least $100 a door. But that's conservative maintenance, conservative capital
Yeah.
expenditures, conservative vacancy rates. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for. I don't really know what too many others like look at, but yeah, that's kind of what I shoot for at least.
Gotcha. Okay. And yeah, I guess you said you had the short term rental too. And you were saying, I was surprised when you said that it actually doesn't cash flow that much at the end of the day, because I've seen a lot of people on social media talking about how Airbnb is the next thing and short term rentals can, give you 2 times your rent profit back every month. So,
Mhm. Well, I guess I'll say that this is not like a standalone house. It's a it's basically it looks like a hotel from the outside. They call them condo hotels.
okay.
So like from the outside, it looks like a hotel, but each of the units, or I think, no, I think all of the units are technically condos. Um, and so you pay an HOA, and for that, since there is more work involved, we're paying for almost 45% of the gross rents to the property manager. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
um, but like it is right on the ocean, so the appreciation has been very good even since last December when we got it. And like I mean, for like this last like July, our cut of the rents was like 4,200, and our HOA fee is only 1,000. So we did well like last month, but like in December, January, it might
Gotcha.
only rent like a couple nights the whole month. So you're negative those months. So it's just I guess can you have a good summer? But I think on average it's been about $100 a month. It'll be this first year we've had it, but we get
Really?
the added benefit of being able to use it a couple weeks. So that's the really cool part, and we like Myrtle Beach. So
Podcasting remotely can be challenging, but with Zencaster, the process becomes much easier. Zencaster is an all in one web based solution that makes the process pretty painless and simple. Um, Zencaster allows to bring you guys, our listeners, the best quality by providing crystal clear audio and gorgeous HD video when we record with our guests. Zencaster is also easy to use for new users and guests. So, when we have people on the podcast who haven't used a platform before, we pretty much just tell them to show up with a computer, mic, and headphones, and you're pretty much good to go. Um, Zencaster is pretty plug and play. But from local recording to automated post production tools, you don't even have to leave the browser to finish off your episode. Use the code zen.ai/blackbox and enter our promo code blackbox. You'll get 30% off the first 3 months of Zencaster Pro. It's time to share your story.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I guess something I wanted to touch on, like maybe for people who are looking to get into it, or people who are already into real estate and house hacking and want to start growing their business. What was your method to finding property managers that you wanted to work with, and like finding people where like the price was right, there was some like mutual trust? Like, can you walk us through that process?
sure. So I'd say a couple things. Well, one is just to start making phone calls, like just start calling random property managers, talk to them about the areas, try to get a sense for the area, and see if you got a good vibe. And like the first property manager that I ended up finding this deal through, I had called him many times. I had probably talked to him, I think a month and a half, was calling him like once a week. And by the end of that, then he said, okay, I think I have a couple that might be looking to offload. But like it does build some trust just continuously calling. And so if there's an area you're interested in, I would recommend just call some property managers, see what they have to say. I mean, one thing you should look out for that I think I'm like my one property manager, he's got like it's a small shop and he's now got like 300 units under management. And that's why I decided to diversify like the 7 unit to a different. He seemed like he was
Getting
kind
overloaded.
of like almost stressed how much business he was getting. Um, so I guess get a sense of how many doors they're managing and their price structure. Yeah, just see if you trust them. Reach out to other people, or you can. There's all sorts of forums online where you can get advice and try to gain some insight of different areas. Um, Another thing I would do just in general is I feel like a lot of my wealth came when I started tracking my net worth. And it sounds just like a kind of an elementary practice, but just, assets minus liabilities. And I keep track of it like every 10 days. And there's that saying, whatever gets measured gets managed. There is some truth to that. And I think that helped me a lot, not veering too far off my path of what I wanted. So I have found that very helpful too. And I think a lot of people concentrate too much on like their income and not enough on their balance sheet. So that would be one of my recommendations.
Yeah, no, I feel like it's definitely like that last point you made is definitely important. Like if you are making, for instance, like if your income is 4,000 a month but you're spending like 3,700 a month, like you, even though you may make more money than someone who maybe makes less money per month but has, say, fewer, like you were saying before, liabilities, they spend less on something, or their cost of living is less. um I don't know, it's something very important to focus on, especially if you're trying to focus on like your financial path to financial freedom.
Oh yeah.
I know. Oh, I know I already asked you about the property managers, but one last question I had about that. Do different, from your experience, do different companies or agencies, do they have different pricing structures, or like are there some fixed
Mhm.
models, whereas like some variable models?
Sure, absolutely. So one property manager just does straight 10% of gross rents every single month, and that's that. I have another property management company. If they're taking over a property, they will take like um if the units are already filled, they'll take 50% of that first month's rent and then 10% of gross. And then if they have to fill a unit, they'll take 100% of the first month's rent. And that seems to be relatively common. So those are kind of the two, either like a straight percentage or something that's kind of front loaded for when they have to do the work to fill a property. That's kind of what I've seen.
Got you. Got you. And I'm assuming that when you're talking about something with more units, then you probably have more negotiating power, or I guess are able to just get better rates in general.
Yep. Actually, the one property manager I originally had, if if I give him more units, the rate would actually go down from 10% of the gross rents to 8%. So yeah, they give you deals based on how many units you send them. Then you kind of just have to ask yourself, do you want to be so concentrated with one property manager or not? That's kind of the
Yeah.
question.
I think
Yeah, for
it
sure.
also.
Definitely a balance.
Sorry, I meant. No, I was just gonna say. I feel like that also comes down to like as you accumulate, a higher net worth, but also more properties, you can you have a little bit more room to work with in terms of like, this person, their service is a lot better. They might charge a little bit more. I'd rather go with them because it frees up even more of my time to then go pursue more properties. But when you're early on and you can't really risk, or you can risk it, but it becomes a bigger risk.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to be more conscious about those things. Same thing with repairs and you having to fix that roof for 4,500 right off the bat. Like when you have 10 properties, yeah, all right, it's 4,500. We'll just take it out of the cash flow of the other
Yeah.
properties. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just think that's something to consider too. Like it's always I always see these people talking about it that that first rental property, that first 100,000 net worth, that's always the hardest, and then it's not like it becomes easy after that, but it becomes a little bit less stressful and you have more leeway. Have you Do you feel like that's become true as
A-
things
a-
have started to
a-
grow?
Absolutely. As soon as I've kind of set in my mind, like I want to pursue this, I mean, the house hack really allowed me to do some like incredible things. Like I pursued all of these other passion projects, and I was able to go live with my now wife in Austria for like 5 months, like during COVID, and like that, I would not have been able to do that had I not been
Yeah.
house hacking and like really concentrating on making my financial picture strong as I could. And yeah, compounding is a great thing. There's a reason Einstein said that was the eighth wonder of the world. So
uh, that's a good point. um, yeah, so I guess the audience can take something from this, but this is a question almost from me to you. I'm preparing to get into my first house hack in the next 6 to 12 months, anywhere between there. I'm starting to look. uh you've already given a lot of advice, but what's like one thing that you think, looking back, if you were to do it again, what's a piece of advice?
well, from my experience, I probably would have bypassed a pool. At the time, I was like, yes, pool.
Oh, you
Like,
thought it would have been like a
I,
better
I
opportunity
mean, I mean the thing I was I mean a little well selfishly I like swimming so
oh, because
I
you were
would
going to live there too.
but I was also thinking it to compete with some of these like luxury type of places. I mean, it would be nice to have a pool. I mean, it doesn't have to be something like spectacular, but an option for someone to walk to the backyard and jump in the pool is pretty nice. So that makes it a little easier to rent out if it's got a pool. So from that way, I guess I am happy. But in terms of maintaining it, I or I'll say I would have tried to outsource that maintenance earlier. I guess that's what I would say. So try to focus more on finding good people that do the work instead of just trying to figure out everything on your own.
Thank you. Yeah, because I've been trying to play things out in my head before they happen. Like, what am I going to do with this situation? How much cash should I have on hand in case repairs need to come? And what if I can't fill a unit right away? Or I don't know. So
And
no, that's helpful. Thank
it
you.
is a tough. I mean, like learning to outsource, I would say, is like a skill. Like it's
Yeah.
something that they don't really teach you, and there's an art to like. I don't even think. I mean, I'm still working at it, but like in terms of like interviewing people, like how do you find if this plumber is a good plumber? How do you find if this pool person's going to be reliable and do a good job? It's not all that easy.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, for sure. Is that something that the property managers would typically take care of if you were to hire them and have some kind of deal with them?
Yes, they would.
Okay,
So yeah,
cool.
actually, one of my, I mean, I I had bought this house with the intention of moving out and running out the whole thing, but it just so had my wife moved here now, and we've kicked the roommates out. Um, but if we were to move out, yeah, we would just hire a property manager, and they would take care of the pool.
Okay, cool. And all right, I know before I said it was the last question about property managers, but this is something that I'm very curious about. So with property managers, you do pay them, like it seems like at least some amount of like some fixed percentage of the monthly rent. However, if like repairs come up, or especially if something big comes up, does that come out of the property manager's pocket or your pocket, or is that something that's like decided beforehand?
Mm-hmm. So one property manager kind of operates like anything maintenance wise, he would just take care of like before he hits. I think I set it to like 350 or 400. So if any repair under that amount, he's got the liberty of just fixing, and then so he'll pay for it. And then when I get my invoice, I'll just reimburse him. Um, and for like, but like the big stuff like the roof, I would actually have to take care of. Now the 7 unit, um, that property management firm has a construction arm. So if you had something that was big, they would at least get a quote from them. And I think one or two others. I actually haven't had like a big repair. I mean, we've put some stoves in, but the way they have it set up is they actually collect all the rents and take all their maintenance, and they're cut out, and then I just get the net. It's not like I get all the money and then I have to pay them back. Yeah, they just take it out. Um,
Gotcha. So it's a
so
little bit
that's
better,
how
right?
that's how it's worked. So
All right, thanks for clarifying. All right, I guess if we were to like zoom out and take a look at like what you have done in with house hacking and with real estate in general so far, and what your plans are for the future, what does that look like? Is there anything in specific that you're like setting a goal for, or is it more like, or are you kind of just seeing where things go?
mm-hmm. um, I've kind of tried to make my goals a little bit more flexible. I'd say if you would have asked me this like a couple months ago, maybe like a half a year ago, I would have for sure said I want to get to like 100 doors or 100 units in the next like 5 years. Now I don't know exactly how I would do that, but now when I started looking, a lot of the rent ratios in a lot of these areas aren't as attractive as like 4 or 5 years ago, or even 2 years ago. Um, so I actually, my wife and I took a land flipping class. So now I guess we've been buying up land in like desert in Arizona and just selling it. And it sounds crazy, but and we're talking like an acre for like $2,400. Like these are like small dollar amounts, but the yields are like insane when I started investigating them. So we've kind of been doing that, and now I guess I don't really care, but like how I get to I got my goal, I guess, is like I want like $10,000 per month in passive income. That's kind of my goal. It used to be, I used to think like, okay, it's definitely going to come through um, like multifamily houses or single family houses. But now I'm a little more flexible in my mind and trying to just experiment wherever I find interest. So just trying to, I guess, keep learning, and hopefully the money will come.
I think the seller's financing thing and those avenues of getting like lower down payment options, because most people think, yeah, I have that opportunity for a 3.5% or 3.5 to 5% for the first time home buyer, but then after that, the next home I need automatically I need 20%.
Mhm.
But there are a lot of options out there where you can put 10 or 5% down on your second or third home.
Absolutely. So actually, I don't think I even mentioned this. So the the first set of three houses in 2018, the price was 60,000. They actually wanted $20,000 down. I didn't have $20,000, so I went to my brother and a friend and got them to give me 15,000. So I was really just in it for five. But yeah, I mean, you as creative as you want to be. And then actually for the Myrtle Beach property, I got my uncle to finance that one. I just, he had passively been saying over the months of talking to him, he's got all this cash just laying around. And I said, well, you, how about I pay you
Let's put it
interest
to
instead
work.
of a bank? And it's, win-win for everybody. So, there's just lots of avenues. And I think until you
Yeah.
start learning about them, it seems like you might be restricted. And actually, for the first house hack, I don't think I mentioned this either, but I actually took a loan from my 401k, um, and that was just an avenue I guess I hadn't really thought of until I needed to. Um, so it's
No.
another way that people could go about it. If you were contributing a lot to a 401k and you thought it was a good enough deal that you could take a loan, at least you're paying yourself back in interest. Now, I guess the one risk on that is I think if you're fired or let go, I think you're supposed to repay that loan within 6 months, or you have to pay the 10% penalty. But don't quote me on that.
I also, isn't it when you take a loan against your 401k, you can only get up to 50% or 75% or something like that?
I think yes. I think that there is a stipulation, and I think the nominal dollar max I think is 50 grand per year. So I think you are restricted, but definitely another avenue to look into if you've been putting a lot in there.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
but I've pretty much just been trying to ponder all my options at this point because
Uh
I've
huh.
been thinking, you know, once I get the first one, I'm gonna want to immediately start getting ready for another one, but I know I won't have that cash available right away, so
Hmm.
I got to think, how can I get that? How can I, save up faster? Because it's not like the property's all of a sudden going to be cash flowing me enough that it's making a huge
Uh huh.
difference towards what I was already saving before. It might be an extra few $100 a month, if that. So
Oh, here's a question for you. Have you heard of the Burr strategy?
yeah, yeah.
So like
What about that?
that's one common. You buy a property, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, and that's the way I guess you could use that's those
I
same
mean,
dollars over and over again.
when you refinance, like, isn't there?
Hmm.
I've heard about it. Where like people rent the property out for a few years, let someone put some equity into it, and then refinance. But can you do it right after you renovate and then get like a reappraisal for the property, and then what that difference you can get in cash?
Absolutely, yeah. If you bought something for, let's say 60 grand, you put um 20 grand in repairs, so you're in it for 80, and you think, well, I guess beforehand you thought if you did that it would appraise for 100. You could immediately go to a bank, get it appraised, hopefully it comes in at 100, and maybe they say they want 20% down. Well, now you are in it for 80, and now you get your 80 grand out, and you still have your 20 grand of equity that you've forced into it through your rehab.
I guess the only thing that's kind of tough is I'm in the tri-state area, like New
Uh-huh.
York, Connecticut, New Jersey, so the
uh
houses are so expensive. But I was also thinking about, going outside of New York State and going
Uh-huh.
somewhere like where you said Myrtle Beach, not Myrtle
Yep.
Beach, but like South Carolina area,
Uh-huh.
North Carolina, because I know some people have had success there.
Yeah, I think
But
the high dollar amounts has kind of like steered me actually towards this like land flipping because I can kind of I'm actually kind of been implementing. It's kind of like a burr, but on the land. So like if so like for example, we bought this plot of land for 5,400, knowing someone would pay us 15,400 for it, which sounds crazy, but
yeah,
they were willing to pay $1,000 down and then $400 a month for 36 months. So basically, to increase my yield, I basically just went to a buddy and said, will you give me like $5,800 and I'll pay you 10% interest? So basically, we got all of our money out, kind of like a burr. So we got all of our money out of the deal, and so when those new buyers are paying us the $400 a month, I now have to pay my buddy about $200. So I'm netting 200, and I've already gotten my original capital out of the deal. So it's
yeah,
essentially the same idea as a burr, but I'm just yeah, we're just changing the cash flows, but same idea. So it's just as
yeah.
creative as you
No,
can.
yeah, that's actually insane. But it's actually funny because what I'm at 2 weeks ago, we had Daniel on,
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Martinez, and he was actually bringing up the same thing. And he wasn't talking about it in the way of land flipping. He was doing it more of just the arbitrage, like
Hmm.
just buying it and reselling it, not doing anything, which I guess you're still doing. You can call it arbitrage too, but yeah, he was talking about it too, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, how can you make so much money or have such a great return? But yeah, no,
I
it's
think that from my research that seems to work right now because it's not as there's a big knowledge gap. It seems
the
there's a
value is
big
more on potential, right? Like
it's
of what the property could be.
yeah there's some information mismatch, and plus it's not as liquid, and like a realtor, you can't get a realtor to help you sell a $2,500 plot of land.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of just it's kind of, well, it's literally in the wild west, but it feels like the wild west, like in these like land flipping uh ecosystems, I guess you could call
And for the land flipping, do you have to show up, make an appearance, check out the land, or is this something that you could do completely remotely?
So I did not. I have just. I'm doing. We're doing it completely remotely. Haven't stepped into Arizona. I mean, we get like the satellite images, and we still do a proper due diligence. We make sure there's no break in the chain of title, and I mean, we make sure they don't owe taxes. But even if I mean, the taxes for a lot of these things are only like $6-10 a year, so it's just
oh my
like
gosh.
crazy stupid small amounts of money. um and so there is proper due diligence, and technically if you well on the like how we're selling this on a land contract, they're actually not supposed to build anything until they've totally paid it off. So, and I don't think they even have the authority to. So if they started building, that could be a problem. But it would get fixed. Like, um, but but no, I have not visited these parcels of land.
I, f- I feel like you don't also like there's less need to, especially when comparing against a home or a rental
Mhm.
property, because there's nothing to look inside. Like it's
Yep.
all kind of there, and as long as the ground underneath isn't like full of sinkholes or something, I feel like you should be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
The
a lot
floor
of
is made
people,
of lava.
yeah, a lot of people use these as like recreational. Like they'll take their four wheelers, or maybe they'll camp, one night a year, or just use it as a pit stop going from like, there was a guy that lived in Reno, and was traveling to Texas, and he knew this route, and that's why he bought the plot of land in the middle of Arizona, just so he could like save on hotel, because he knew he was going to be going on this route for years. So yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there's all sorts of different people that have different needs and wants. So
Of course, of course. I guess follow up to that. What is like the like land buying ecosystem look like? Is there kind of like a Zillow for land, or can you find land on Zillow?
I think I'm not exactly sure on Zillow. I would guess you can search for vacant land. Not 100% sure, but there are. So a lot. I mean, if you go Facebook Marketplace, we market a lot on there for our land, and we use a site called Landmodo um, to find stuff and to kind of get like what the comparables are, because we're actually, and the reason I really wanted to take this class about land flipping was I was more curious about the systems they used. They do a lot of direct mailings, and I wanted to see what that was like. So you need to kind of come up with some comparables, because when you're mailing out the letters, you're putting an actual offer on these letters. So you need to know kind of like what the comparables are and what land is selling for in that area at any given time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's actually really interesting. It's one of those things where I feel like if you're not in it, or if you don't know someone who's in it, you don't even think about
Right.
the industry, and how there are people whose entire life's work is in land, and buying, selling, work, doing everything with land. So it's really interesting, and I think it definitely seems like an exciting opportunity to diversify your portfolio, like you were saying
Yep.
before.
And one thing I've kind of appreciated more is you don't have to deal with like, I mean, there might be other issues with people paying. They agree to pay on certain terms and then they stop paying. But if that happens, we can just take. I mean, we basically just resell it to someone else, but we don't have to like deal with like tenants and maintenance things, and who knows, like in the COVID stuff, like I mean, some of my tenants in Michigan just like decided like, no, we're not going to pay. Like there's this COVID relief assistance that's coming, and we have applied, and so we still ended up getting paid, but it was like months later. We're talking like 4 or 5 months later. I ended up getting the rents, but so there's pros and cons to
Yeah,
everything, I guess. Yeah.
you have to take a risk if you want to
Right.
see some progress in any area. So
Yep.
you got to put some skin in the game. Um, One thing I did want to talk about before we uh, start to head towards a wrap up. Do you want to talk about your book? I thought that was pretty interesting.
Sure. So, well, my one my one book. Well, I have a few books that I sell on Amazon. One is kind of more run of the mill actuarial book for passing the exams. That's called 15 Weeks to Pass an Actuarial Exam. That's not quite as cool as my. The other book is called Make Better Bets. That is also kind of actuarial in nature, but I tried to throw some stories in. Um, but it was basically about this Excel model that I used to bet the 2018 World Cup, and uh,
Really?
and this was kind of something that came from the house hack, because I had all this extra money, and it felt like I was like lighter, and I pursued a passion project, and it kind of stemmed from some soccer books that I read called Money in Soccer and Soccernomics, and the one of the authors, Professor Szymanski, actually taught at the University of Michigan, where I happened to go to school. And I mean, I had already graduated, but I gave him a call, and he gave me a lot of his resources. And that kind of got me going down the rabbit hole. And I used some of my VBA skills that I had learned to try to create a model. And it's an ongoing thing. And I'll definitely be doing more of it.
We both have some
Nice.
experience with software, so I haven't worked with VBA, but um, yeah, yeah. So, what do you enjoy just sports betting in general, or was it more finding the edge of like the statistical aspect of it?
I was trying to find an edge. I do not bet that often. But I mean, really, I should be doing things that the data is a little better. Like for the World Cup's probably not the best thing to be betting on because
Yeah.
the data is coming from all these different continents. So, I was trying to bet on like World Cup groups that had like two European teams more than a group that only had one, just because I had more data on all the European matchups. But I really should like look at a league, but at the time I was studying for the actuarial exams and I had like a 3 month window where I could try to make a model and devote time to it. And I thought, what better way than preparing for the World Cup? Because that's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. Add a little bit
Yeah,
extra excitement.
100%.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. If you're at all interested in analytics or just a fun crazy story, it's a good, it's a fun book, it's a fun read. It's a quick read. It's not too long.
And they're both on Amazon, you said?
They are both on Amazon.
Awesome. I just wanted to touch on that quick. But uh I guess the blog I wanted to touch on everything that we kind of talked about when we were speaking, but yeah, you have the blog Fired to Fire. Are you still actively posting on that? How often do you usually put out content and stuff?
So going back to my net worth, I was actually posting my personal balance sheet every 10 days. People seem to kind of like get like bored with, because I was basically making a plan for the next 10 days and then I would compare my actual to my planned. And I think it's very good practice um, just to get comfortable. I mean, and one thing with real estate is you really start to appreciate, I think, the loan pay down component. So like a lot of people talk about cash flow and appreciation, but to really you can really see how you're paying down the loan each time you make another mortgage payment and when your liabilities go down. So it's a very good way to get a handle on your personal finances. And in on that blog, so I do a lot of like my personal balance sheet, kind of explaining the changes from the prior 10 days to now, and also do summaries of books I read that hopefully will help people. I think most recently I did one on the infinite banking concept through R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, which my mind was like blown when I had heard about
Yeah.
this concept. So that was pretty cool. So anything I read that I think people would gain from, I try to summarize and post my takeaways.
Gotcha. Yeah, we've had a couple guests talk about the infinite banking stuff, and that's just another really smart tool that you could use. Um, yeah, Mike, I guess one question that I had was why every 10 days, I guess, because I've been budgeting for the past few years, but I've been tracking my net worth for the past 2 years, but I do it month over month.
Mhm.
Did you see an advantage, or like as you were getting busier with real estate, things were actually changing within 10 days? It's just at my point, I don't feel like things change enough month over
Uh,
month that I would.
I mean, I have a couple different loans that get paid on different
Okay.
frequencies, and I guess I started doing it 10 days just so I could get more practice. But I guess there's not really that big of an advantage, honestly. Um, um,
Gotcha. Just
so
personal
yeah,
preference,
it's
really.
just
Just
personal preference, and kind of like once you start getting in the swing, you probably don't have to. I mean, you probably don't have to do it every 10 days, but it's good practice, I guess.
I think also as when you get really into it and you're like, you know, through this journey, like some months you're way more into it, and others you're kind
Uh,
of like letting things work for themselves. But those months that you're really into it, you want to see those very small incremental changes, no matter how small. You're like, oh my gosh, another like $100. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
no, I feel that. Um, Ahmed, was there any other questions you wanted to ask?
Yes, I guess one more. I know you talked a decent amount here and there about your profession as an actuary. Uh is that something that you want to give up at some point in the future, or is that something that you would want to do alongside your other ventures?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I spent so much time. I do like the material, and I think a lot of the skills that I've used towards like analyzing deals in real estate and doing this soccer model, a lot of those skills I've learned through the daily life of as being an actuary. So from that perspective, I like being an actuary, and I like learning those things. And I spent like let me think, like 11 years um, passing the exams. I mean, it was a brutal process. So I sacrificed a lot. I mean, eventually I probably would look to transition, but I think it'll be a while.
Yeah,
So
I
for
the
now, it's good.
the only reason I asked was because I knew how much went into to get to where you are now. And yeah, I know a lot of an entrepreneurial people, like their goal at some point, or at some point, either whether it's sooner or later, they do want to just focus 100% on like their own business that they're building. But it is a little bit harder when you've invested like a decade of your time into something.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
when your whole career is like, I mean, not your whole career, but being an actuarial, it's analyzing risk, right?
hmm Yeah. Right now,
So
I'm.
it helps with
Yeah.
all your other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I mean, what I do for a living is basically explaining the changes in our balance sheet. So literally tracking like net worth, basically, of this one product. It's a variable annuity, but yeah, we just trying to explain the income statement and balance sheet for um, this product.
You're getting plenty of practice.
Yeah. So
Awesome. Was there anything else? Any questions you had for us before we wrap it up? Otherwise, we'll give you a chance to just plug any social media. If you want to say your website again, all that stuff.
sure. So well, if you want to reach me, I'd say probably the best place is LinkedIn. I'm the only Jack Allweil on LinkedIn,
I'm
and
gonna add you right now.
um, like you guys said, Fired to Fires, the blog, my books that you might be interested in are Make Better Bets. The other book is probably a no go, but Make Better Bets has gotten some pretty good reviews so far. And my brother and I have started a podcast for books that we read, and that's called the Brothers on Books podcast. And you can find that on all the platforms and YouTube.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jack, thank you so much again for coming on and for walking us through your journey. To our listeners, you all know where to find us at Black Box Podcast, No A in the Black, on all social media platforms. Um,
Yeah, Jack. Thanks. It was a
Thanks so
pleasure.
much,
yeah,
John and Ahmed. Thanks so much.
great conversation. And everyone, we will see you next week.
Peace.